Hello and welcome to Too Fast, Too Forever. There's all kinds of family. We chose this one. This is episode 362, Furious 7, Lap 14. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe, too. And this episode's brought to you by the French rock band Nobody's Cult. Check out their new album, Mood Disorders, out now. Nobody's Cult.
Well, shout out to Nobody's Cult and welcome to Too Fast, Too Forever. With us once again, that's a very good sponsor. With us once again, all lap long, are two precision drivers, the owners of the train, Kim, Bhasin, and Walt. Hickey. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey.
Welcome back.
We are thrilled to be here. This is very, very fun. This is a really exciting episode for us because obviously this movie's.
You have a good train fact?
Do we have a train? Kim, did you want to do the train fact this time?
I thought it was exciting because the train fact. That's what I was asking.
We could do a train fact. Okay,
I think we just tell him. I think we just tell him like the other drop of this.
Mm-hmm.
The other drop of this.
Yeah.
Which is?
I like when even you're confused about the train facts. It's very exciting.
You go for it. Come on, give him the train fact. Whatever you're thinking of right now, just hit him with it.
There's a murder mystery inside the train.
Inside the train?
That's a second question. I'm not going to answer that.
No, I'm not. It's not a question as much as a rehash of the thing. Okay.
So murder mystery dinner theater inside a train car.
I don't remember saying dinner.
It's implied. You guys are classy gentlemen. You're not going to have a party without a dinner.
Who are the actors? Are they the actors?
Okay, no, we cannot find out.
I know. I'm not asking a question. I'm just punting.
Also, Joe and I are recording in the same room for the first time in years. This is going to be maybe weird. Good weird, but weird. It should be noted. Anyway, welcome back to Race Wars, guys.
Race Wars.
Oh no!
Is that why you say it's a big one? Because okay, 6 movies, 12 years or 14 years later. Oh, still calling it Race Wars. Okay, got it. Cool.
Yeah.
No, it would have been so easy to not call it Race Wars anymore. So easy, the easiest.
They're like, look, Hector's running it now. Iggy Azalea is there. It's new faces, still called Race Wars.
Yeah. No, at no point was a brand consultant briefly brought in to be like, hey, how do you think we get this on ESPN?
No.
Or maybe they did, and it's just a horrible, McKinsey comes in. They're like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, well, so I just read your newsletter this morning about the Cornhole League, and they're trying to figure out how to make that profitable. How would you do Race Wars if you want to get it on ESPN? You want to merchandise it? Is it step one and only step change the name?
No. You actually leave the name. You sign a Drive to Survive style situation, and then make it a Netflix documentary series about the people within Race Wars, and then that's the first step.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you focus on their races?
Absolutely.
You lean into it.
Every episode is a different. No.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. I'm serious.
I think that they do have something going with the live event.
They do.
Part of it though, because there's so much stuff to do, it seems, aside from just watching drag races or whatever. There's music and there's partying and there's it's like a Formula One race. Or I went to Sail GP this weekend here in New York off of Governor's Island.
For what? For fun or work?
For work. And
Insane.
the sailing atmosphere, it's all these people just hanging out on Governor's Island, and occasionally there's boats going by,
Did you figure out who was going to be first, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, all I know is that if you ain't first, you're last.
No, I mean first against the wall when the revolution comes. Which one of the people at the sailing event on Governor's Island is first against the wall when the revolution comes?
So you guys said this is a big movie, a big episode. What about this one? Have you been waiting for Fury 7? What about this strikes your fancy so much?
For me, it is this is another moment in the franchise where they really fundamentally changed the premise of it. And we'll talk over the next coming episodes about how much that worked. But I think that this is an episode that, much like 5, really begins to assert that this can be something bigger, different. The motivations can be grander. The people involved can be more competent. It's definitely the biggest, we'll talk to this when we get to my element, reshuffle of the party and the skill sets endemic within it. And so I just think that this episode's really interesting as both a piece of franchise maneuverability, as well as obviously just it's got a couple beginnings and a couple ends in it. And I think that makes it invariably interesting.
I think that kind of goes in line with the way that we look at this is from here on out, like nothing should work as well as it does, and it's still kind of a mess. But the fact that they're able to figure out a way to like persevere in the face of like their star dying in real life, it's like I don't know how you did it, but like it feels kind of like a magic trick.
It really does. I mean, so that's my answer. Is like I really think that this is a fascinating film for like metatextual, like Doyleist and Watsonian reasons. I guess is the way to put that sometimes, and like. I think it's a lot of fun and really, really compelling. I don't know, Kim, do you have any particular thoughts on
this one's just important to me personally, and I'm not really sure why. I don't think it's Paul Walker. I think so. Like at my wedding, the best man at my wedding delivered the line during his speech, "Double alpha man candy." Know what I'm saying? So for whatever reason, like this is really stuck in my life. 7.
It's as good as reason as any, I think.
Yeah. You don't have friends, you have family. You don't have the best man, you have the best family. Let's kick things off. So I was saying to Joe before we started recording, I found more 80s moments in here, or things that could be seen as 80s moments, than I've had the last handful of movies. But do either of you want to start most 80s moment in Furious 7? Which also, on surface, like feels like it's really trying to be as modern as possible, but to me it's just like, oh, there's a bunch of 80s stuff in here.
I have my one is the introduction of a shadowy government agency. Like once you start like, you know, we're no longer an organization represented by 3 letters, like we're just the government now. That feels very like 80s, very ET, very like, oh, you know, just a bunch of spooks who come in from God knows where in Northern Virginia and start calling shots, and that feels like very War Games, very 80s, very like, you know, it's not, you don't want to pick a 3-letter agency to be the bad guy, so you just make them like feds, you know?
Yeah.
Just like that's the Top Gun Maverick bad country is unnamed because we need to sell it everywhere.
Yes, we need it takes place in Pseudo Arabia because you don't want to actually piss off a country.
Yep.
But like, no, it's definitely like the introduction of a shadowy government agency. Like, you know, originally Brian worked for the FBI. That is a known quantity. They have laws, rules. Even the Diplomatic Security Service, that thing exists, right? But like once you start getting into like Mr. Nobody's particular,
there's
like,
a war going on between shadows, and it's like, what? Okay.
Yeah. So that is definitely very 80s to me because I think that they abstract government baddies, and that feels very of that decade.
Kim?
Such baddies. Well, the most 90s moment is certainly Ludacris singing "Can't Touch This." But
I had that note this time. I absolutely had that note this time. I was like, do you think that he feels honored that he got to sing it, or does it feel like do you think he ad-libbed that, or they wrote it in the script for him?
It seems like one of the things where you ad-lib, 100 lines in that one spot, and it probably was him. Good for you, Luda. As always, killing it out there.
I do have to say, while on the topic of Ludacris, my boss just got back from Cannes Lion, and they had Ludacris on Tuesday at their beach. I was just like, I can't get into explaining like what this means. I'm just like, cool, man. But the most 80s thing for me was, so in the 80s, there was like a resurgence of slapstick comedy in film, and there was a bunch like Airplane and movies like that. Yeah. And there was a lot more like stupid physical comedy in this than in previous ones. Like the best example I have is Tej with Roman's parachute in the plane. Like that is just pure slapstick.
Yeah.
Brian revving his minivan at the start.
Yeah.
And then it reveals him just being at school, and then running over the terracotta soldiers as they're going from building to building to building. Just slapstick physical stuff.
One of my things on my list was a word you just said, just minivan. The fact that there's a minivan in this is just like, oh, that's pretty 80s. Just like the rise of the minivan and the
rise of the Dodge Caravan. Yep. If it only had that wooden belt, on
wooden
the side,
paneling,
that would have really hit it.
Jody, your most 80s moment?
Yeah, so I had a couple this time, kind of on the note of what Walt was saying, the idea that God's Eye is just technology that just works, and there's no bugs in it at all. It just constantly works, and like the feardom of a technology that just works. Like if you have ever tried to like connect anything,
no Xbox 360 Red Ring of Death. It's like, I remember my friend
it controls every like the driver that you would need to install alone would just be wild, right?
My friend left his NES on for weeks because like the game he was playing didn't save. He's just like, no, it's gonna be fine. I'm like, what? Okay. Yeah. And then Xbox 360 just like, Some of them just don't work out of the box. It's like, how is this a product?
That was my first one. I have two more. Sean Boswell is just 80s because he was born in the 80s.
Sure.
80s. 82 looked it up. I think he's on the most 80s. But my most 80s moment of this film is The Rock using an analog stamper to stamp the paper.
Oh, that's very
excellent.
good.
Not
that
PDF.
sound effect isn't even used in libraries anymore. Yeah.
Even though he's using a self-inking one, which I don't think would have been there. He doesn't have an ink pad next to it, but just the trunk, like that. Yeah, that's the most 80s moment for me.
So I have Minivan. Speaking of The Rock, I have his Incredible Hulk TV show, which is on from 77 to 82. So it was a couple of years in the 80s. Just hacking in general feels very 80s. But my most 80s pick, just Kurt Russell, Man of the Decade.
Hey, heck yeah. That's real good. I like that a lot.
Especially because like on Friday night, I rewatched The Thing, and I was just like, oh yeah, 80s Kurt Russell was like the man. And then to show up here, just like, yeah, most 80s, just Kurt being Kurt.
Do you think that he enjoyed his one day of shooting?
Enough that he comes back.
Do you think he enjoyed his one day of shooting across 4 movies? Like, he's barely in any of these movies, and he's the most important character in the franchise. Yeah, I'm sure he had a blast drinking beers with Vin Diesel in a warehouse somewhere, and then talking about beers in the back of an SUV, probably in another location within that same warehouse.
I bet he got paid handsomely, too.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, great day. He loves it.
Talking to Fury 7, is this a movie that overall, I don't know how to ask this question. Do you love this movie and think it has issues? Do you love this movie and think it's great? Like, because I think there's two different things. Like, I think this is the hardest one in the franchise to sort of separate because there's so much emotion tied to the See You Again, the Paul Walker. Where do you guys fall in terms of like how much you enjoy this one and how much you think it's actually a good movie in this franchise?
I mean, I really enjoyed this one on this watch again, but I think like the first thing I noticed just off jump, right? At the start, it's The Rock and Statham fighting, and there was I was like, oh my god, like the production on this fight, the choreography, all of that has taken a gigantic step from 6, and certainly everything else before it. It's not even close. And I was like, oh, look, I'm watching like this is an action movie again. I was really taken aback by it. I don't think I realized that it would be such a gap. And then that had me looking at all the other fight scenes thinking, oh yeah, this is great. And the people that got to do the fight scenes were excellent as well. Against, we have Ong Bak Thai Warrior on the bus, and we have Ronda Rousey in the 3-time WWE Women's World Champion.
She was 3-time world champion.
Yep.
I just remember her bungling that WrestleMania so hard. That's the only wrestling moment that I remember of Ronda Rousey's.
For Ronda. No, she's not the moment. We'll get into that later. But yeah, that's what that's what I really took away from it immediately. And it really like improved my like view of this film.
So you love it and you think it's great?
Oh yeah.
Cool. Walt?
I think it's a little bit miraculous. Like I think because this is James Wan's first movie in this franchise, and previously he was just doing, not like just doing, but like very much horror movies. Budget's a fragment of this. Like this is very much a big step, and I think that like that kinetic element of it really is a director with a big first feature with the like very very big budget behind this kind of feature. So it does feel a little bit more audacious. I'm of two minds on it. One of which is that like I think the action set pieces at times do feel a little bit like we've been here before. Like, oh, you've hidden a microchip in a car. Like we've had that before. Like the chase sequence, I think, was definitely riffing on like the tank sequence a bit. And it did feel like, they did up the game a bit with obviously dropping out of a plane and obviously going tower to tower and that kind of thing. And it was like really interesting visually on that front. I don't think it totally, like it works as like a kind of a sequence of action set pieces, but like, and I'll talk about this potentially a little bit later with another element of this, but it does feel like a lot of this script was decided by the tax code of who was going to give them production benefits. Like, why are they going from, like, it's not like when James Bond goes to 3 countries in a row, it kind of makes sense as to why James Bond goes to each of those countries. Even in Furious 6, right? If Fast and Furious 6, like they start in London and then they go to Spain. And like it's a very clear reason of why they have to go between these locations. Right. This is, I think, like the first movie that actually does this many locations, because like even like the previous ones, like, you know, you had Tokyo, but that's one location, right? Like, you know, the Arizona stuff is basically a little prelude. Yep. You have Brazil, right? And Brazil is just such a signature location that fundamentally defines that film. It really takes it to the next level of like, okay, we're going to go to, you know, here, and then we're going to go to Azerbaijan, and then we're going to go to like, you know, the UAE, and then we're going to go to Los Angeles. And it's just like, it's a little bit too set piece driven rather than a lot of character driven or that kind of element of it, which does feel like it's growing into what it's about to become, which is basically just like, you know, James Bond if James Bond was from South LA. But I don't you do see it like the stretch marks on this movie, I would say, is the way that I would put it.
Well, I think that's something that like we have noticed where they're actively, I think this is like maybe the pivot point, and maybe it's because of Paul, maybe it's, I think your point about the geography is obviously done well in advance of him dying, but like, they're like, okay, what actor, what rapper, what song can we put in this movie that's going to like activate an entire country to go see this movie? Yeah. And this is the first one, like this one made like 1.3 billion. So like the globalization worked, like it hit, but it's also, it's kind of all over the place.
I'm sure every single person in Wisconsin went to go see this movie because of T-Pain. He has that mansion in Wisconsin. So, I mean, I get it.
Playing the role of T-Pain.
Playing T-Pain, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that there's a world that T-Pain exists that doesn't know Ludacris, but Ludacris exists.
And knows T-Pain.
And knows T-Pain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There is, I'm sure you are both somewhat aware of this because this is a thing that has just permeated the podcast throughout, but there's a character reference in this movie that has captured our hearts and our imaginations, and we don't know much about her. We know one thing about her.
We have some theories.
We know her name, and we know one thing about her. But they're in the warehouse, and Roman takes it upon himself to basically be like in charge of the mission. And he's like, last time, you know, I did all this work. I took the plane up the sky, bow, and Brian says, the only thing I've seen you take down is No Knees Denise at prom. And they don't reference it. They don't elaborate. Roman just goes, really, Brian? And they move on. But the name No Knees Denise,
what does that invoke?
Has stuck with us.
What does that invoke
we are
in
obsessed with it.
Because what does it mean?
We've heard we ask everyone we can. We have so many thoughts, so many options.
Different options.
The more answers we get, the less clear it becomes. If you hear someone described as No Knees Denise, what does that mean to you? And did you even notice that in this movie, or that just like float by you?
Like, as a person who went to all boys Roman Catholic high school and knows the cruelties of young men, I can surmise perhaps what it is saying about her virtue. When they imply that is not prone to kneeling. That being said,
she's prudy. You're saying
perhaps yes.
Okay, so we've heard both sides of that too.
So then, why would Roman be upset when Brian says, "I saw you take her down"?
Because it's rude. Because he's in front of strange people.
Roman
who he hasn't
has a character of great moral standing.
Yes,
with his plane that says "It's Roman bitches," where he's had 4 women at the same time. Okay,
wait.
Same character, right? We're talking about the same guy, same Roman.
Yeah,
same guy.
Heard. Okay, I walk it back. I mean. Perhaps No Knees Denise is the supervillain of the whole franchise. How about that?
We tried that. We pitched that.
Etion?
Yeah, she's the head of Etion for sure.
Kim, you have any thoughts on No Knees Denise?
My brain went in a different direction. You know how if you run a marathon and then like the last part, like your legs run out and then you wobble and you wobble and you wobble and then someone either helps you or they don't? Yeah. Perhaps Tyrese was racing. Roman was racing her in a marathon, and she wobbled and went down, and he passed her, and didn't help her at all. Oh. And Brian's just giving him crap for it.
That is literally one theory we've never heard.
Mm-hmm.
He tripped her. He took her down.
He took her all the way down, and for the rest of her life, she was no knees because of what he did.
This poor woman.
I mean, like, Tion is Greek for knees, and E is, also Greek for absence thereof. And I'm just saying, it makes a lot of sense.
Wow. Can you imagine if that was actually true?
Vin Diesel should go to jail.
Because no one would know other than us. Like, no one knows No Knees Denise. It's not like any casual fan of the franchise.
We've Googled it. There's no mentions
Pays that line
on
a
the
second
on
mind.
the internet at all.
The only thing that I got when I searched it is the Book of Revelations, where it's the name of an angel that does not possess knees. So,
Look, maybe. Is it weird, speaking of Revelation, that they invoke, not speaking of Revelation, they invoke Bin Laden in this movie?
yeah, did we kill Bin Laden at the point that this was? Yeah, we did. It was like this was 2014.
Because I remember I was at Best Buy, so I was working at Best Buy, so it was either like late 2010 or early 2011, and this is 2015.
Got it. Yeah. So very well done. I feel like that's the kind of joke that you can only get away with after that fact.
Because they're like, if we had this, we would have caught him in an afternoon, and just like, you're equating like mythical hacker Ramsey here to like the man who like orchestrated a plan to kill thousands of Americans. Like,
Also, we did find him within like an afternoon. He just like ran away faster than we can get to it. Like that's the whole thing. Like, I don't know.
They don't call him No Knees Osama.
God damn it.
I'm sorry, Walt.
Fuck. All right. Kim, what's your wrestling moment from the movie?
Go. Excellent segue. All right. So let's see. My wrestling moment of this movie, not Ronda Rousey. It is Brian fighting on the bus with Tony Jaa, a.k.a. Ong Bak Tai Warrior. The choreography there, all of it. There have been a few totally absurd like wrestling matches on moving things over the years. So like last year, one of the Japanese wrestling promotions had a match on a bullet train going like 180 miles an hour.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
But my favorite example, and I think has the most parallels to this one, is truly one of the worst wrestling matches of all time. And it was in 1995. It was Dustin Rhodes versus Blacktop Bully in a King of the Road match.
What does that mean?
What is a King of the Road? Basically, they fought on the back of a moving 18-wheeler that was like hauling bales of hay somewhere in Mississippi. And it was absolutely terrible because they couldn't like fully stand up, so they're constantly falling down. So even like, I mean, that makes me very impressed with Tony and Paul Walker for their abilities to fight on a moving thing. I believe Blacktop Bully did win that match, and Dustin Rhodes' brother is the current WWE champion right now.
Cool. Walt, what is your most D&D pick? Most D&D moment of Furious 7?
Yeah. This movie's getting real deep into D&D, by the way, because we are firmly in the period where like Vin Diesel has returned to the franchise, is at this point like firmly, in my view, the auteur. Like is calling sufficiently enough the shots. His production company's behind it. He has the biggest say on the most important decisions. Like, is at this point is sufficiently instrumental enough on this project that it is absolutely within his design point of view, and what he wants will by and large make it to the screen. So at this point, like, while in some of the early films, I had to kind of point out some of the more incidental similarities. At this point, like, I do think that we are getting to the part where a lot of this stuff is deliberate, and a lot of this stuff is informed by Diesel's history as, like, a guy who grew up playing D&D and is therefore kind of informed by this. So, like, number one, this is a very clear level up for everyone involved, right? They've hit the point where they've gone from being, criminals to fugitives, and then from fugitives to, big heist kind of coordinators, right? From heist folks to, at this point, international presences and doing favors for, not just, police, but now doing favors for like international diplomatic, like, clandestine organizations. Like this is a very big major step up, which we've kind of been tracking over the course of this, but I think is so central to how advancement works in this franchise and how plot works in this franchise, because it is absolutely Gygaxian and not what you would ordinarily see in a hero's journey kind of style thing. So like, I'm going to go to like similar, close to my top D&D moments again. So one of them is, this is a classic situation at the conclusion of this film, obviously, the crew, they're fighting the bad guys. The bad guys have a helicopter. The bad guys they're outgunned, right? And then it looks like they're going to lose. And then what happens? But the DM's player character, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Mr. Hobbs, comes out and then notices like, oh, these guys are going to get TPK'd. I'm going to help get them through, and I'm going to tank the helicopter while they can go do their other stuff. And so a situation in which the DM realizes he may have miscalibrated the difficulty and then has to send in his personal character to hold off one of the threats that he himself has inserted. That is very obvious D&D situation that people might find themselves in.
I'm wondering... Like, I watch these movies on Amazon Prime because I have all the digital copies redeemed on my account there. And Amazing. So I was like just mousing around or whatever. And like while that scene was on, there's like the X-ray thing that comes up and it just says, originally he couldn't be in this movie because he was supposed to shoot Hercules and Hercules got delayed or whatever. So he could do a little bit of shooting on here. But I wonder how you change that action sequence if Hobbs can't be in, like, is not a character in your movie. Like if you can't have someone Deus Ex Machina like save the day.
Oh, I know. You'll notice that there's a drone and a helicopter, and one of them kills a drone and one of them kills a helicopter. Originally, I guarantee it was just one CGI effect, and then they split it up so that like Vin in the crowd gets the drone, and then Dwayne gets the or other way around rather.
Real quick, do you know the premise of that Hercules movie? It's incredible.
It's actually very good.
It's actually
it's a good. Kim, would you like to explain the premise of the Hercules?
It's very good. So Hercules is just a soldier, and he has like a bard with him who talks up all his feats, which then become legend, right? So he's actually he's not like a demigod. He's just a very strong, strapping lad.
He's got a good street team.
So that was one thing, and that's actually going to come up later of chafing between the party PCs and the DM's player character. That becomes a more significant thread within this franchise. The second one that I had was, listen, this one is the first time that these movies really feel like railroading. And railroading is a phenomenon in D&D, where D&D is an open world game. You can the party can make any decision that they want to. Oftentimes, the DM will lay out some options, and those options will be variously better or for worse. Usually, the DM will have a couple things prepared, regardless of what they end up choosing. But in some situations, you only have one really thing that you've prepared, and everything else is just not really everything else. And so, if you presented your party only one option on what to do next, you've kind of sucked out a key component of what Dungeons and Dragons is, which is supposed to be an open world, player-driven game where the D&D is just God / a referee, and turned it into the D&D. The DM is telling you what you're going to do next. And this movie feels like railroading a lot because it kind of hits a situation where Mr. Nobody shows up and says, like, you guys are going to do this job in Azerbaijan with me. And then, they're then told, like, oh, well, we need to go to Dubai or UAE. I forget which one exactly they go to. And then they're like, Abu Dhabi, yes. And then they're like, oh, well, now we need to go to Los Angeles. And it's never like the party deciding we need to do this, right? It's always them being told what to do and somewhat instructed, which kind of, undercuts some of the heroic choices that need to be made at the same time that, like, clearly you have a series of set pieces that you have to hit. And so it was the first time that railroading kind of became obvious in this. But all that being said, those were just two prevailing elements of D&D that I saw. There is a very big one that we talked a little bit about earlier on this. And it is, this is a pretty significant party refresh, right? This film, they have the funeral for Han. They have the funeral for Giselle, or at least the explicit acknowledgement that they've lost these people. This is the film in which they, Brian exits the party, right? It's the film in which they bring Letty back full on and full forward. It's the film in which they add Ramsey, Nathalie Emmanuel, and it's just a really big reset between what the party has been and the skills that they had and moving forward. And there comes a moment in a lot of D&D campaigns where you're like, all right, well, listen, folks, we've made our way through the first couple, dungeons. It's very clear that we have 2 rogues, a bard, and no healers and no magic users, except some very basic ones. And given the threats that we're about to start facing, we need to start, maybe one of you guys needs to become a cleric and move forward. And so, having to deal with character deaths and allowing the attrition to kind of happen as it is, and just kind of moving on to, like, beef up your builds with, as we've kind of discussed before, the way that they handle technology in this is essentially the way that one handles technology in D&D, rather magic in D&D. And so, like, they need to add a wizard in the form of Nathalie Emmanuel's Ramsey, just because at a certain point it does kind of defy imagination that Tej can kind of do all the stuff that he's doing. And so I think that this is like the party transition period where you upgrade and change the composition to better meet the needs that you have. I think it's a classic moment in many D&D journeys.
I also think that like I have not played D&D. I just sort of know roughly how like that kind of thing would go, where the game starts small and like as the games you go on, like we can't just like take out this like band of rogues or whatever. Like we need to like keep like taking out bigger and bigger creatures. And now it's like, okay, now each movie you have to save the world from a bigger disaster. And now we need a wizard who has unlimited magic or whatever, right? So
yeah, or even just like significant tonal shifts. Like, you know, Kim and I are in a game that started out for, you know, people who play D&D, started out doing the Fandelver, right? And then did a couple of one-shots in between en route. And now we're doing Strahd. And that basically takes you from a very fantasy element to, you know, other fantasy elements, and then it becomes kind of gothic horror, and specifically one that involves lots of vampires, and one that involves, you know, the difficult abilities to heal, right? And potentially requires more magic rather than less magic. And so like a party that isn't built to endure in that kind of world will, you know, whether they choose to or not, oftentimes, you know, through attrition be shaped to be better fit to kind of confront some of that. And so just kind of watching, you know, oftentimes with D&D you play a module, and how well you built yourself for the previous module, whether it was like a coastal style story or a, you know, dungeon delver kind of story or a city based story where you need a lot of charisma and face stuff, can oftentimes kind of give you a lot of baggage when you move on to the next one. And you do have to change up things occasionally.
Yeah.
So
I love that Tyrese outlined, like, here's where I got all my XP from for the past several times we played. He's like, Bria made me take out a tank. I took down a plane by myself. Yeah, it was
it's literally how you would argue to the DM that you deserve to level up. Like,
he is kind of like pitching his boss that he should get a raise too, right? Just like, hey, like I'm kind of important here. I do like the joke though, where like Kurt Russell or Mr. Nobody's just like, you know, I was impressed by what you did, but now that I see your team, like now I'm really impressed. Like you did it with these guys, like you did it with Roman. Like, come on. One family member I do want to talk about, like my favorite, who just keeps getting, you know, shafted and like undersold every movie. They don't know what to do with Mia, and like I know that like every movie they have this thing, but this time around, I was like, oh, I like it. Like it's so explicit where she's like worrying with Dom. She's like, I'm worried about Brian, whatever. Oh, also, by the way, I'm pregnant again. It's just like, oh, so you're like a worry and a baby factory, like in the same sentence. It just, there's nothing else you have to do. And just like, it just makes me sad.
She's a sexy lamp in the movie. And that's, I mean, it's annoying, but like it's a trope for a reason, because that is 100% what they've done. And like part of it is like, she very much started in the film series because Michelle Rodriguez was out of it, and they needed someone who was potentially closer to the original design of what Letty was meant to be on paper, right? Is that not the case that you guys had kind of described?
Makes sense to me.
It would make sense.
Yeah.
Like you lose Letty, so you like kind of let Mia do things, anything.
Yeah. I don't know. Again, like a part of it's just like, it's hard to... A team of more than 7 is very hard to keep track of.
Right.
And so like, and they did kind of hit a point where like, if they do want to add people to the crew, like you do kind of have to give people a retirement card and a gold watch and send them on their way to the grave in Tokyo. Like,
well, this is also the pivot point where like when Paul dies and Brian is no longer in the movies, they're like, oh, well, Brian's not here, so we can't do anything with Mia. Like there's no way. And so like, I don't know if that's by design or laziness, or it's just like what you're saying, an opportunity to be like, well, we can get rid of 2 characters and sort of focus on, you know, as opposed to just like no longer having Brian, it's no longer having Brian or Mia.
yeah.
Well, it's laziness because she's still Dom's sister. Like, you don't... she doesn't need the Brian marriage tie-in to be a part of the... She's literally the one who's in his family. Right.
Yeah.
That was a gracious way to put it, though. You were like, if we could get rid of 2 characters at once when Paul Walker dies, as opposed to just like, we've shelved Mia the whole fucking time.
Yeah.
But then again, they also have a brother that we don't know about until F9. You know what I mean? So like, they're not really... The Dom, the Toretto siblinghood is not necessarily held very high regard.
For a movie that makes up so much about family, they really don't actually care about family.
No.
Like it's amazing how little we always talk about. Like we don't know anything about like their parents. Like we know now Abuelita, you know, Rita Moreno in Fast 10, but like we don't know anything about like we hear the one story that he tells about his fada, but like we don't really know much about like the Torettos or the O'Connors at all. It's just like it's like found family. So
yeah. I mean, like the line of like, I don't have friends, I have family is also exactly how the most toxic workplace in the world would describe what they're building. Like, it's a very, like, I don't know. I feel bad for how they handle some characters, and also, like, there's clearly people who want to be here and don't want to be here, and it just seems like at times they just kind of mismanage where some of this goes. And also they just start adding action figures where they might not need to, you know?
Yeah. Joe, what'd you notice this time?
Oh, I had a question. Dom's sitting there. We're near the end. He like played chicken on the roof with Shaw. Okay. And they're talking about like street fights. He's like, we're in a street fight. And he's like, the thing about the streets is that the street always wins. What does that mean?
What do you want it to
Well, if you, I mean, the street collapsed.
Yeah, no, because that's the other
argue.
point of this, Kim. Exactly. The street literally falls out from... He's literally
Perhaps
talking...
every other time Don has fought in the streets, the ground has given out.
Underneath him, like Moses. He just parts the street.
And then eliminated his enemy, yeah.
But to me, that doesn't...
That's what he's saying.
So you think the street wins by nature of his opponent losing? Because it feels like if a street collapses, I would not say the street wins. I would say the street loses in that one.
The street is extremely lost. I mean, at least it took someone with it, I suppose. Perhaps in the longest term, the street ends up winning because everyone dies and then the street survives.
I don't know, man. As a guy who's really followed the congestion pricing clusterfuck in New York City, the street's not winning this one. It's not going good.
What is congestion pricing? They charge you more now?
No,
now
like,
that they're hoping
driving downtown. And there was like a whole thing that was going to like generate from Numlock News, numlock.com. Shout out to the daily newsletter. They were going to make like $1 billion, and then just like we're not going to do it.
They were going to make $15 billion, and it would basically fund the entire capital program for the subway for the next decade. And
it was basically if you drive a car in Lower Manhattan, you would pay like
toll.
up to $20. Like it was like peak hours. Like any time you drove there'd be like a toll, but like during peak hours, it'd be like a hefty toll.
Yeah, like London did it, Amsterdam did it, like a lot of cities
do it. Did it work there, or do they back them up?
It works amazing there. It makes it like they basically put a tax on congestion so that like there's less of it, so there's fewer cars on the street, and the cars that are there are funding, public transit growth. It's a very, very good tried and tested system that they basically ripped out the cord 3 weeks before it was actually set to launch. So it is very depressing, but the streets don't always win, baby. That's what I'm saying.
When I went to Amsterdam for the first time, I've only been there once, but when I went there, I was like, oh, infrastructure can be modern. Like I'm so used to like our broken ass roads here that I'm like, oh,
the
like
streets in the Netherlands won. That's crazy.
Yeah.
The streets in the Netherlands. Yeah, so what the fuck does the streets win? Because like the streets don't always win.
A key theme of the Fast and Furious franchise is that often the streets lose.
That's what I mean.
The wear and tear
alone. Considering himself the streets? Because he's like an international spy now. Are you still the streets when you're like working with government agencies? Are you still the streets?
He likes to style himself as this. Like, so like when I go to Brazil in like the later movies, he's like everyone knows him and he's Dom. And even in Havana, he's Dom. He's always he's always that in the whatever the local culture is. He does represent. He counts himself as a representative of the streets, regardless of whether he really is.
I mean, he did invent Race Wars, so that's got to count for something.
I have another question for you that it's I think easier, but I also want to get your honest opinion about it. So there's the scene where Deckard is having dinner alone in a warehouse with a grenade, under his napkin.
Yep.
And he says, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and I've got a lot of friends. Meaning he's got a lot of enemies, but also people who hate his enemies. But I'm wondering, do you guys think Deckard has a lot of friends? Because like he's really good with babies, we know that. Like he's charming. But do you think Deckard also like he hits in Hobbs and Shaw he's a brand new character, but like you think Deckard Shaw has a lot of friends, like genuine friends?
I think that it's one of those situations where like he's in a bowling league and no one knows what his day job is, and he doesn't tell anyone what it is. They just know him as like Mr. 290, like he never gets all the way, but he always throws a pretty good, or like he's in a darts league and everybody thinks that he's actually really dope because he's got amazing aim. Never talks about the office, doesn't want to talk about work, just wants to hang down with the boys at the pub. They have a different drinking culture than we do in the UK.
I like it. That makes a lot of sense. I think he has the capacity to have friends, but he doesn't. And I like Walt's take on it that like he still socializes, but those friends have zero clue what he's actually doing. And like sometimes he's just like, yep, was away for work for a couple weeks. Sorry guys, missed the last round. How'd everybody do? And they're like, oh, it's pretty good.
What have you been up to? Oh, just this and that. A little
It's
bit
like
of that.
London Steve, you know?
And like, how's the mum? And it's like Ellen Mirren's doing great. Like,
Yep. It's also weird. Like, there's a point where somebody says something about Deckard's mom, like something like rude. I'm just like, you can't talk about Helen Mirren like that. But like, we don't know it's Helen Mirren yet until the next movie. But I'm just like, you can't just like put these bad vibes out in the world and cast someone that we adore.
yeah,
Feels rude.
it's incredibly rude. I don't know. I do think that my favorite thing that Vin Diesel does is like just roll like best actress winners into this franchise like the Pokemon, and like it's amazing. Like,
Well, Joe has a theory that he just loves older women.
I mean, I buy it.
I think older women also love Vin Diesel. I think he has like a nice like younger guy charm to like that age demographic.
Is there anyone else you would like to see cast in feature films here?
So
He's
like
pretty
Fast
much added
X had
fucking everyone.
what, 4 best actress winners in it, right? Because it had Brie
Yeah.
Larson, it had Helen Mirren, it had Rita Moreno, and
Well, Gal Gadot won for Wonder Woman 84, right?
oh god.
I mean, if you like Walter, the
Charlize
extremely,
Theron. I'm sorry, Charlize Theron.
Of course.
Charlize, yeah. Well, the extremely important movie 80 for Brady has some prime candidates, I think, to join the Fast and Furious universe. Now, like, Rita's already here, right?
Yeah.
She's on board.
Who's the rest
what's
of the
Jane
cast?
Fonda up to?
Jane Fonda, yeah, that's right.
Like
I
Mary
think
Steenburgen.
Michelle Yeoh.
Ooh.
It works. It works. You know it. I feel like Olivia Colman would succeed in these films. You know?
I want Julia Roberts now that we're talking about it. She's a little younger, but I think that I think she could fit.
She is fun. She is fun in like franchise pictures. She was great in like the Ocean's movies. Like
That's what I mean.
like,
And I want them to do the Italian Job Oceans crossover where it's like, is this Julia Roberts? And like, no, she just looks like her. And then like you just run that same bit into the Fast and the Furious.
Walter, who is Michael covered for his podcast? It was Meryl. Meryl's not been in these movies yet.
Oh, it was Meryl, it was Julia Roberts, and then it was Katharine Hepburn, who, by the way, would be amazing in the Fast and Furious franchise.
Yeah. You know who I want?
Who?
Again, too young for the conversation we're having, but also great leader of a heist team. Get Kate Blanchett in here.
Oh, hey, yeah, absolutely. Kate Blanchett, amazing in this.
Just like incorporate all of Ocean's 8 into this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
You know?
I mean, she would be
Rihanna's
great.
in that movie. Good.
I was just thinking that too. And we always have Rita Ora, Iggy Azalea. But I think if you bring Rihanna in, she has to be like the like start the race girl, right?
Seeing Iggy Azalea, by the way, really transported me in time.
Did it?
That was a
She
pop
had a
culture
moment. Now A$AP Rocky's married to Rihanna, right?
Right.
That was like the whole thing.
The fun little note that I like little detail that I noticed this time is when Hobbs is in the hospital and he's watching the football game. It's the University of Miami where he went, but he did not play there because he got injured. But they said number 94 sacks him, and he wore number 94 in college. So like whatever.
Really?
Yeah, he did stroke his own ego in that
So
one.
a
I
little
knew
bit.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shocking. That's fun.
And then
That's
there's
a good
one
touch.
other note that I had that was, I still think it's so funny that when Dom goes to Tokyo, which is how Tokyo Drift ends, says he knew Han, said Han's family, we cut to the next scene and Sean goes, I had no idea American muscle could drift that fast. Like, it's so funny to me that like Dom has probably never drifted before and then just dethrones this guy who has spent months learning how to drift in his first race.
Didn't he drift American Muscle down the mountain
Yeah.
with a Nissan engine, I believe?
His dad's
Yeah.
car, yeah. But no, Dom's like, no, I cannot lose a race, even a race we don't see.
That takes 10 years to do.
Like, you could write that dialogue like, oh, I didn't think the race was going to be like that close or whatever, like where it's ambiguous as to who won, but just like, no, like Dom not only won, but like won big. It's just like, come on, guy.
It is funny because, like, you know, it's very clear, like, in the time since the franchise last saw his appearance, like, clearly he's not the protagonist of this film franchise, and so he like, you know, in a wrestling move, that is where you can beat up on the old guy. 'Cause that's
Should you other notes, other thoughts about Furious 7?
Yes, it's well documented in this franchise that I know everything about my father is one of my favorite parts.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I know where you're going with this.
This movie has my second favorite one, and I've definitely talked about it before, but I'm going to have to talk about it again. The end of this, where Brian's just yelling, "Come on, Dom, just breathe, Dom, breathe." We say that in our house so fucking often for no reason. Because I think it's like one of the worst moments of Paul Walker's acting career on film.
It's not great. It's also like it was like briefly one of my notes for D&D thing, because I was like, it's very like, you know, when you really are just sucking at throwing death saves and you're just like, nobody in the party is actually a healer, so you're like, what's a medicine check? Oh god damn it, we should have had the cleric all this time. And it's just like, and then they basically talk him into waking up again. I don't know. I think that the ending is very good in general.
It is good.
I don't think that is a good part of the ending. I think that if there was a reshoot, I would have shot that, reshot that.
Well, there is also now the secret wedding that we get revealed, where now you guys have seen Los Bandoleros, which is when they get married.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Where she gets that scar.
So actually, a question that you guys absolutely know. I have seen, obviously, up to the most recent film. And at that point, in that film, he has a child. And this child is a secret for a while. Does the child exist at this point, do you think?
No, okay, so here I was going to say this for the next movie, because there has been a theory that when a guest years ago posited this theory, kind of broke our brain. But when you watch Fate of the Furious, there is the plot line where Charlize as Cypher abducts Elena and their baby, who Elena has not named, because that's the father's responsibility. So she's been carrying around this baby for weeks or months or whatever without a name.
Sure.
You know, the whole thing is Dom turns against the family to get his family back, whatever. We had a guest who said, I think that was meant for Mia, that if Paul had not died, they would have abducted Mia, and Mia's in this movie, I'm pregnant. They're like setting it up. And so then you have Dom and Brian, who could maybe together turn against the rest of the family to get their, you know, shared son/nephew back.
And they were like, we like that idea. We'll just make it that chick that we forgot about.
Right. So watch Fate of the Furious with that in mind, that like this could have been Mia had tragedy not befallen the franchise. But your question, does this son exist? The question is, if you use fast math, it does. Where they don't care about years or timelines.
Because there's a scene like when Dom goes in to meet Hobbs in the hospital, like they interact briefly, and they don't really talk.
And she's clearly not pregnant, at least visibly in this.
Because there's also the scene where she falls out the window in the opening action montage.
Also true, yeah.
That Hobbs goes to the hospital because he like catches her body. So like that is probably not good for a fetus in your uterus. But there's been
then
a lot
that also brings you to the other logic that like Letty exists, is back, and then he gets Elena pregnant.
Yeah, it's like, when did they... How long was this pregnancy? When did they conceivably last sleep together?
It's like the question, like when do Han and Leia start fucking? Like, is it before, during, or after?
I think that Han. I was like,
Empire?
hold on, who's Leia?
No.
I
Oh, God, no.
Same reaction. I had the exact
the
same
other
reaction.
perfect franchise. But the question is like, when are they actually hooking up? And like the question is like, I don't know. It's it just like the means, motive, and opportunity are a bit enigmatic when it comes to that, because that is just kind of dropped on our laps, and I would imagine that they were going to indicate something about this. But anyway.
Because if like Elena had like a 3-year-old, but it's like a baby, you know what I mean? Like there's ways that they could have done, and then you cut to 9, and all of a sudden this kid's like 5 years old. It's just like, was there time? Like it just, none of it really adds up. But your question is a good one. There's just no real good answer.
Yes,
but it's a good way to watch the next movie. I agree with Joey. Like, now watch it and be like, what if this was Mia instead of Elena?
Okay. I like that. I will do that, because it was actually just a question that just like, because that is coming up, and like, you know, these movies do like, there's no like huge time jumps in this, right? Like there's a couple like little tiny ones, but like it almost does seem like they largely take place not in real time, but like if it's been 3 years since the previous movie, a lot of times it seems like it does, like, you know, from here moving forward, at least the time does kind of move ordinarily.
Yeah, there's two things about time that, like, there's the Tokyo Drift gets time shifted, and then to make things accurate, I think the first couple of movies both move up 3 years. So, like, instead of 2001, it's like 2004, instead of 2004 or 2003 or whatever, 2006. Like, there's like a little bit there, but yes, by this point, if there's been 2 or 3 years since the last movie,
it's 2 or 3 years.
It's about 2 or 3 years in the franchise.
Got it.
but Dom is still 40.
So, like, what year does this film take place?
2015-ish?
Okay. That makes sense.
But then in 2017, when Fate of the Furious comes out, Elena has like a 3-week-old or something.
Right. The Ish is doing a lot of work there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that time actually is like very funny to think about is like, can you imagine what it's like to live at 1325 and 1329?
Oh, we have, Walt.
You
because
have?
my dream is to not live in 1327, but to live in the house across the street so I can look at 1327 every
1326.
morning when I wake up. My bedroom will be the front-facing room, so I wake up and I see 1327. I open my blinds. I'm like, oh, what a beautiful day. And then I walk outside.
I don't know, because so like, first of all, it's just like, oh yeah, the neighbors. Well, yeah, so that place got shot up a lot like 10 years ago.
None of them are ever
Bombs.
invited to,
and
like,
then
the
I
cookout?
swear to God, there was a bunch of parties, and then they just fucking abandoned it. Like, I don't, and like, there's no back taxes apparently, because like it's just like, and then when they finally moved back in, then it exploded, and then it was exploded for like 5 years, and they didn't, like, I don't know if it was like
They
a whole
weren't
like,
around
And there were a lot
either.
of government agents there who maybe ran the joint. I don't know.
it's also like, I don't know if it's a contractor dispute or something, but like that thing was under construction for no shit like 5 years before they even put another. It must have been like a Great Recession thing. I don't know. And it just seems like if you lived in the neighborhood around them, they'd be annoying for a couple of reasons, but it's mostly just like the house being in various states of shot to shit exploded.
Yeah, I think the backyard barbecue is the least of the
No,
worries
it would be the
there.
tuner engines revving at all hours of the night every single night. Like,
that.
oh, he's home now. Okay.
Well, okay, I live in Queens, so that's actually fairly normal for me right
I
now.
guess so.
I have a question for the three of you. How do you grip a bottle of beer?
Oh, you mean like, do I do it like this? Like the whole
Yes.
like...
No,
What's
it's
this?
the you put your thumb on one side of the.
This is amazing
and
audio,
you
by the
wrap
way.
all 4 fingers around it's the top part of the bottle. There you go. There you go.
I do
Yeah.
this. Yeah, I hold the top. Yeah, you hold the
Yeah,
top.
you gotta hold the top.
So you
this
don't
film,
heat the
I think,
beer with
really
your hand.
solidified it for me. There's a scene where he does it perfectly. Like he's been doing this the whole series.
Who
right?
does?
But Vin grabs the beer, the Corona from Kurt Russell, and just places his hand on it so slowly and curves around. He's like, "This is how I hold a beer," and now it's how I hold a beer as well.
Do you not hold the neck? You normally hold the whole bottle?
No, neck. Of course,
Always neck, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
always neck.
You don't want to heat the beer. Like, you're just making your hand cold and the beer warm. This is
I thought you were asking it because somebody
What's
did it
going to happen?
weird.
Is Corona going to taste bad if it's more like?
My friend has a theory that all Corona is skunked because it comes in clear bottles. Every
think your
Corona
friend's
that
right.
you ever drank is skunked.
There is one thing that this movie is, because again, like, knowing the backstory of what happened and like how it was made, it does make it like interesting of like how did they pull some of this stuff off, and like some of it is. Are you guys familiar with the Kuleshov effect?
No.
It sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I would recommend, like, if folks find this interesting, like, look it up, because it's a visual effect, and it's basically the idea that like you can have a shot of a person making a face, and then a cut to something, and then them making an emotive face as a result, and depending on what you put in that interstitial,
Oh, yeah. Yes.
adjusts what your monkey brain sees their emotion register as. So even if though it's the same exact shot of the person making a face, it is nevertheless because the previous shot was an explosion, or because the previous shot was a person weeping, or because the previous shot was, I don't know, Dominic Toretto driving a car through 2 buildings. The neutral expression of the reaction shot is the viewer wants to make it think that it makes sense within it. And like when it comes to this movie, where they, by admission, reused a lot of footage, involved his siblings and doing body double shots and that kind of stuff, reusing footage from earlier films and that kind of stuff. Like, it's really, the Kuleshov effect is really on display in it, especially when you kind of compare it to, like, potentially what, like, because the final shot of him is from an earlier film, if I recall correctly. It's a shot from Fast 5.
Yes.
And like, it's just like, obviously, like, you do have these kind of like emotions in this shot, but like, it is really interesting how like it's a kind of a testament to what editing can accomplish.
Yeah.
Of how they're able to reuse these shots and kind of work with what they had to imbue new meaning. Like, there's even like the phone conversation between him and Mia, that I was wondering how much of that was scripted, how much of that was kind of cobbled together, how much of that was like...
That feels really bad, though. That one, sometimes it makes sense, and then sometimes it feels very disjointed, like they're having two completely different conversations.
It's almost like the original conversation was scripted, like, you need to get out of this because or something like that. But, like, I don't, like, it would not shock me if they added the pregnancy spot after the fact to basically, and then add in, like, it just felt very interesting of, like, what you can kind of accomplish with editing, what the boundaries of that are, and even in like something as like pop cinema as this, which is like, a lot of times like these are like film school style like ideas of like this effect and that, but like it is kind of just a really compelling way to kind of understand what this medium can and can't do. I don't know. I think it's very fascinating in that regard.
So with that in mind, we still have several more movies to go in this lap before we catch up with this. But do you want Brian the character to come back?
I don't think I don't think that would make sense. I think that would not. I don't think that could make sense.
They hint at it at 9. At the end of 9, his car pulls up. 10, they say he's there, but he's babysitting.
Yeah, I think that's the best that we're gonna get, and I don't hate that. I think unless there's something real good on the cutting room floor from an earlier film, I don't know how they do that. I mean, like, even,
they wanted, the family has already come out and said they wanted his brother to stand it. Like, the family is aggressively pushing that they want Paul Walker back in the franchise. Disregard that there was a documentary that came out that said Paul Walker was supporting his entire family.
Yeah.
Maybe he was babysitting Idris Elba,
Like, part of it's like, not to keep comparing this to Star Wars, I think that they're just actually interesting, like, counterfactual sometimes of, like, one is very, very Joseph Campbell, one is very, very Gary Gygax. That's my fundamental belief about this franchise. But, like, Star Wars had two situations like this, kind of. One of which was obviously the premature death of Carrie Fisher and how they handle that. And, like, I think the big thing that surprised me with those films was how little they had left in the can in terms of how to sculpt a plot for her in the third film. I had kind of expected that they would have more just in extra footage, but I think the way that movies are made right now, you don't have all those extra takes like you used to have back in the day. There's not a bevy of cut scenes, in part because audiences are accustomed to 2 hour, 37-minute films, in part because streamers don't give a shit about how long these things are, in part because so much of them are previs that you actually kind of know what you have in the can before you actually shoot it. But, like, that's an element of that where I was, like, very surprised and somewhat distressed at how little they actually had for Fisher when it came to kind of finishing out that arc. On the other hand, like, they were able to make a modestly accomplished fake Tarkin. It wasn't for Rogue One.
Rogue One, right? Was that Rogue One? Yeah.
Did they pull it off perfectly? I don't really know. I think some people thought it was more rubbery than I did. I bought it, and part of that is just because I tend to be, I'm down to kind of go for the ride that they want to take me on. And, like, I think, one thing that they were saying is, like, listen, like, for better or for worse, like, this guy, Peter Cushing, was an actor for decades. We have had so much film of him because he was in television, he was in film, he was on the stage. We just have a lot of what this man's face looked like. So we're able to get a little bit better out of it. I don't know, like, and obviously Fisher didn't have that because, there was a fairly substantial break in her acting, and you can't just use the 70s footage of Leia to simulate, the 60-year-old Carrie Fisher.
Yeah.
And so, there's back and forth on that, but, like, I do wonder if they have enough for it to be good, because it's very cusp right now. I know they worked with Weta very closely, and I do know that they have obviously had a lot of advances in the digital realm on this kind of stuff. But, like, I genuinely don't think that they can pull it off enough for him to genuinely be a character.
Are they waiting for a point where they can, like, deep fake it?
I mean, they already can. It's just a matter of whether people are going to buy into it.
Yeah. It's also going to be so scrutinized.
Where I think we've landed is that, like, it has to make sense story-wise. It has to make sense emotionally, but don't have him be, like, the star of the movie. Like, if he shows up in a car to save the day and, like, he's, like, kind of like at the end here where, like, you can do a face-over or whatever with his brother as the base or whatever, like, yes, but don't have him be, like, the star of the movie.
Yeah, I think, like, and, like, there's a couple ways that I could see it working. Like, for instance, let's say that the franchise ends with Dom doing some sort of sacrifice play or something. Like, you can do a voice thing, right, fairly convincingly right now. You absolutely have enough data with all the recording and all the time that that we have of Brian, that you could do a fairly convincing voice facsimile of him through existing tech. And if there was like some way to kind of radio or call in, that could be somewhat convincing. But I don't think that like there's any kind of way to justify a physical presence of him, just because I think that they really pushed the boundaries of what they could accomplish in this film. And even there, you can kind of start seeing the side, like the scuff marks.
Yeah.
Kim, do you want Paul back? Not Paul back, Brian back. We all want Paul back, but do you want Brian back?
They've developed so many characters. I don't think it's needed. Again, it'd be cool if they do it right and in a very short way and a very triumphant kind of happy thing. But that's about it.
I think that's all we're leading to right here, right? He's just going to be the ultimate hero, right? He needs to come in at the end and be like, oh shit, Brian's here. You got the piece that we were missing. Shit. And then it's like, they win. Hey. And everybody's happy. Barbecue. The movie ends.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And that's the end of like the whole series.
That's what I mean. Like the end of the end, like, yes, that's what we get is like they're waiting, their backs against the wall, and then he has the last push.
If they did his, like, you know, his car pulls up, one of his brothers gets out of it and walks forward with the, you know, the shaved cop haircut and moves forward, and it's like clearly not Paul, but it is Brian walking. Like, that's fine. I think that that's more than fine to do, because I think that does acknowledge the character's existence. But I also just think that at a certain point, like, it's tough to. I almost think that, you know, the man was an actor in life. I don't think necessarily the idea that a computer can replicate what he did in death is dignifying in the work that he did, you know?
Agreed.
So either way. Yeah. Obviously all this stuff has complications and you know, particularly with franchise level filmmaking and even just like, you know, corporate filmmaking in which you do sign your image away to these folks to kind of do with what they will. You know, I think he knew what he was getting into on that front, but nevertheless it is, I don't know, it's kind of dicey. And I don't think that unless they have a really coherent way to do it and a really, really like, reined in way to do it, I think that could be an issue.
This is really funny because now you're bringing up the other side of this, is that I think that we hear just us talking that you can sour the fandom on this really quick. Like there's a razor thin line of like what we want, and then like if they went too far, you'd be like, nope, they ruined it. This was terrible. And like everybody talks about like, can you believe what they tried to do to Paul Walker?
Yeah, and again, like just so much of it comes back to like the Fisher and the Peter Cushing of it all. Whereas like Peter Cushing, I do think that they had a plan just because they wanted the effect of him. And I think that that honestly succeeded for a bit. I think that Carrie Fisher at the end of Rogue One in the young Princess Leia role, I think that actually worked. But I just think that like, you know, seeing how this goes wrong, just kind of cobbling together basic dialogue lines from B-roll, it's not always great. And I don't think that it'd be, you know, I think that they really kind of got enough juice from the squeeze for this one that if they don't have to touch it again, I think I'm fine with that.
I am curious to see if they do it, because I feel like Vin at the creative helm is so strong, like feels so strongly about so many different things in so many different ways on this. Like I would be curious like where he would personally end up if he wants who he calls Pablo back. You know what I mean? If he does this, or if he's just like, I want to respect the memory. I want to like, I think he cares enough about the franchise and the relationships to like make sure they do it right. But also he might just want to cater to fans' wins. And like, I think they widely want him back. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you can also look at like the Chadwick Boseman situation in the MCU, where like the general understanding is that like whether or not they directly do a recast, they are kind of prime. Like, you know, they introduced a son, they introduced all this kind of stuff. They're going to do some Marvel fuckery that eventually, like Black Panther will remain within the Marvel universe. I like don't know if it was the right way to do Black Panther 2. Like, I think that might not have been the way to kind of handle that. You know, right. I think that they like that might not have worked as they kind of hoped, and I don't know if it was necessarily what they were looking for with that. So I don't know. It's always a complicated situation. But you know, I do kind of have faith in Vin's kind of stewardship of the franchise long term and his ability to do right by this, you know, longtime creative collaborator.
I would, purely from the creative like character standpoint. I am curious about how Brian's doing in his life at home. Same. Because they set it up in the minivan. The third time we brought up the minivan, but there's that line the teacher gives him, which is, "Don't worry, you'll get used to this in no time." And that scene is it's like from a war. Have you seen the Hurt Locker with like Jeremy Renner in it? He goes home to the grocery store and it's like, I can't live this life. Well, I have PTSD. Like this is a problem. And then he goes back to war. And it's like, okay, Brian, you're being dramatic. I think you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
With your white picket fence.
I mean, I think in retrospect, Jeremy Renner was just like, I can't live at home with this anti-vaxxer in my house. I got to go back to war.
I gotta go.
She retired from acting. It's fine. Even though Lost is still one of my favorite shows of all time, and I will always still kind of sort of love Kate, even though she's kind of the worst.
It's kind of complicated, man. I don't know. I feel like celebrities are a mistake. Actors are fine. Like genuinely, like the less I know about what Woody Harrelson thinks about politics, the happier I tend to be.
Yes,
like,
just actually every actor. You're right. Like the less I know about what they actually think.
I like that a dude can have that career with that face and like just genuinely kind of get by on acting chops. So like the less I know about how he feels about an election is the better.
I think it's amazing that like we're like 15 or 20 years from like the Dixie Chicks like shut up and sing and just shut up and like in a certain way just like everyone's just like just shut up and act, like just please both sides of things, like stop ruining movies for me, just like do your thing. I don't know. Walt, do you have any other notes, any other thoughts about Fury 7?
I thought it was really good. I think I think it's got I kind of think that they were forced to really assess what they were trying to accomplish with this film, and given the necessary gravity of the situation off camera, I think that they kind of really pushed themselves to a level that they hadn't in previous films when it comes to the conclusion. And I think that like genuinely the See You Again of it all is, I think, phenomenal. I think that's a great song. I think it's a standard at this point, just to be blunt. Like, I think it's like not going anywhere. I think that we're going to be hearing that one at weddings and things for indefinitely. It really does stick the landing in the way that I think a lot of other ones are somewhat color by numbers. Even like, 5, which I think has one of my favorite endings of the whole thing. Like, there isn't that kind of emotional pop as much with this one, where like, this genuinely kind of felt like that they could, with a straight face, call this a saga after this movie came out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Kim, final thoughts?
To bring it forward a bit, I think this is the movie where you really get this there's something about the hue and saturation of like Hobbs's office that reminds me of all the more recent films. Like it's everything's like stainless steel and bluish. It's like corporate dystopian cyberpunk, right? And like in all the in the following movies, all the Cypher stuff, it has that and the Mr. Nobody hideouts and everything. It's all this sleek kind of dystopian evil thing, whether it's the good guy or the bad guy in that space.
Yeah,
I like that.
My only notion as we as we're wrapping up with how do you get Brian O'Connor back in this, got 3 words for you: Brian O'Connor anime.
Yeah,
they have like a Family Man anime version,
exactly,
spin-off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like that. That would be a lot
in his minivan. Yeah,
in his minivan. Imagine the hijinks. Imagine the capers.
Someone beats up his kid at school. He's got to go do something about it.
Yeah, you get a lesson of the week, all that kind of stuff.
I would really love that. Imagine like kids would have no idea that it's related to the Fast and the Furious. You
And
just picture it as like Family Dad.
And we've got an animation studio who can pump out 5 seasons of a show in about 18 months.
Oh my God, yeah. They didn't even watch Spy Racers.
Spy Racers.
This show, we'd close our eyes and they'd be like, new season out tomorrow. We'd be like, wow.
There was a stretch where they put out a season in October and then December and then I think like April. Like they did 3 full seasons of a show in about 6 months. Wow,
that's incredible.
I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts?
No, I got all mine in. We're good.
All right, we're gonna go to This Ain't No 10-Second Race, aka Boy Do We Have a Podcast
be hard live
for you.
Because I usually have a computer.
Boy, do we have a podcast for you. Come and check out our show. Yeah.
So as we go on X.com, the everything app, and we find posts by people about the franchise, about the actors, about whatever, and we respond to them as Too Fast, Too Forever. I found Austin at Fucktin. Still a name that we love. Does Sean Boswell ever get to see the blonde from the beginning of the movie? If bro did all that, got sent to Tokyo, and never got to hit, I feel bad for Big Dog, but also Neil is a huge upgrade. Baby girl right there for real. And we said, for real, boy, we have a podcast for you. And Fucktin liked the post.
Bing, point.
1
Point on
point.
the board.
Congratulations, Joey.
Very exciting. Joe very excitedly sent a screenshot that I think, if I remember right, this next one, Joe's also gets a point. You found, gee, that's sus at KS Matrix Slides. I
What the
like the
fuck is
Fast
that?
and Furious Tokyo Drift, and it's just a picture of this wizard guy. Sure, why not?
Oh, yeah.
And we just said same. And I got one like from Gee, That's Sus Joe. You also get a point.
Thank you.
Walt,
Huge.
you found, let's see what this one was. Marcus Rothenberg. Oh, right. This is, you
Yeah.
were trying something new.
I tried
Marcus
something new.
Rothenberg said, just watched a guy Tokyo drift around the corner, demolish a light pole, say he was fine, and drive off. He didn't get far because his car was leaking a ton of fluid. We said, hey, man,
Did it
hope
work?
everything's cool. Also, we like that movie as well. We'll do a podcast for you. Not even our listeners like that one. Sorry,
God
Walt,
damn
again,
it.
swing and a miss there.
All right, I'll never try a new thing again.
You got dog.
And then, Kim, you found BL Star that just said Tokyo Drift was just peak, and it was a video supercut of things of cars drifting, and we said it is. So are you. Boy, to a podcast for you. No likes, unfortunately. Even the compliment could not do it. Now, Walt, I know you sent me one, and Kim, you sent me one. Walt, please hit us with your tweet, please, and thank you.
Yes, it is from @Rebrickable, which is a custom Lego set service, and it's Dom's Dodge Charger from Furious 7 by I Bricked It Up #Lego, and then a link to them, and I was gonna say, like, this build is sick. Have we got a podcast for you?
Okay.
The only reason why there was quiet. You want to tell him?
Oh no.
What?
Oh, I thought Walt stole your tweet. I thought that's what
Oh,
you were
no,
showing
no, no,
me.
no, no, no,
I was
no,
like,
no,
did
no,
we
no,
do it
no,
again?
No, I have a
Again?
different one.
That's why I was excited.
Oh no, I can't do it again. I would feel
I'm also
so bad.
thinking, ever since I saw the Chromatica Bowl on HBO, on Max, sorry, not HBO, on Max, I've had Gaga stuck in my head. So I'm just thinking, let's have some fun. This build is sick. I want to take a ride on your Dom's Dodge Charger from Fury 7 by I Bricked It Up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the only other angle that I had with that was that technically any Lego can be a Dom Toretto Lego.
If you try
Kinda
hard
wish-
enough and believe in yourself.
You don't even have to try that hard.
Kim, oh, this is a good one. Please read your one from BW Carlin @Bailey Carlin.
Bailey Carlin says, my fiance just called the scene in Fast and Furious 7 when they're jumping a supercar through multiple buildings in Abu Dhabi silly. Wedding is off.
Perfect.
So I would like to respond to that with, let's go with, sorry you had to cancel your wedding, but it was the right thing to do.
But it was the right thing to do.
God.
I like the encouragement.
I was just thinking about, that's how I responded, but I was thinking about, like, you don't have friends. You also don't have family. Like, just,
Oh no!
I was going to say, clearly we're not sitting on the bride's side of the wedding. But yes, all in the same vein.
All right, Joe, I saw this tweet. This is not the one that I found, but I saw this tweet when I was looking for mine, so please hit us with yours.
Mine is from SES Narcolepsy @It's Narcolepsy. The ending of Furious 7 will never not get me. That shit still hurts watching.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time it hits for us too. Mm-hmm. Boy, do we have a podcast for you.
Yeah.
Okay. This is almost easier to respond to these from phone as opposed to
Really?
computer. It's weird. I don't know
Okay.
why. All right. I found Fred Smith @FredSmith914. Got to the end of Furious 7. My dog couldn't watch the Paul Walker tribute because it was too sad. And it's a picture of this guy holding his dog's paw.
It's amazing.
Oh,
It's
that
amazing.
puppy.
I want a pun here. I think I had something before, like something about like you don't have friends, you have family, and
Or
dogs
that's
or
so
something.
rough.
God damn it.
Come on, low hanging fruit
Okay,
here,
the
bud.
ending is truly so rough.
Delicious
R-U-F-F?
low hanging fruit.
RUFF. Gotta be RUFF.
Of course. Boy, do a podcast for you and your dog. Okay. Sweet. Solid.
Okay,
I mean,
that's
come
good.
on, it should elicit a response. The whole point is for him to be like, that was the corniest joke ever. But like, he made a corny dog joke about Furious 7. Come on, this is
Yep.
our people's.
Yep. Thank you both once again for joining us to talk about Furious 7.
Thank
Kim,
you.
Thank
Kim,
you.
what you got going on? What do you want to plug? What can people find out about you on the internet?
I have a story out about the Jordan brand, Nike's Jordan brand in China, and all the things that they're doing out there to grow in that market.
How
Jordan
do they feel about
was
the
first.
fakes? Like, 'cause that's where all the fakes come from. So like, they're trying to grow the brand in the land of the fakes.
There is a brand that Michael Jordan sued in China called QIAODAN, Jiaodan.
Okay.
And
Sounds very much like Jordan. Mm-hmm.
it has a little dunking man on it.
Oh.
And I mean, he won the lawsuit, but they're still allowed to do business and everything there. Jordan has done quite well in China over the past few years, and it represents like an outsized part of of Nike's market share there. So it's a look at how they opened a store, a gigantic World of Flight store in
Oh, that's
Beijing, and they're selling $1,000 Air Jordan premium Air Jordans there.
Very cool.
What's the secondary on those? Are they only available at that flight store, I'm assuming?
They're only available in the Chinese market, so that flight store and some other places in the region.
Need to go check eBay and see what the prices are just for curiosity.
They will
what
be
the
high.
flipper is, right? It's going to be nasty high, right?
Probably.
What you got going on? What do you want to plug?
It is summer. Everybody's going on vacation, and box office is looking good. If you were looking for a beach read, you should pick up "You Are What You Watch: How Movies and TV Affect Everything" by Walter Hickey. It is great for beach. It is a beach book.
Your job is beach, and your prop is book.
Absolutely. When I was thinking about it was writing, I was like, man, this is gonna be the beach read. This is a big beach read, so everybody should buy it for the beach. Also, I think that this is coming out the day after Canada Day and 2 days before July 4th. There's got to be some sort of sale at a bookstore. Just check a local bookstore. They've got a sale. Buy the book there. It's great. I would just say that's that. Yeah, You Are What You Watch. It's a book. Check it out.
Very, very cool. Well, next time you'll be on here is in 3 weeks to talk about Fate of the Furious. I don't know what our next episode is because we are moving things around. So just come back next week
for an episode.
It's a pit stop. Actually, I can tell you, I'm going to decide right now what we're going to do next because we have to do things because our guest can't record. We are going to do next week Christmas in July. We are going to do Scrooged.
That's fun. I like that.
Wow.
Scrooged, 80s cult classic. Scrooge next week. Doing that. Come back for
Christmas in
Scrooged.
July. I like
Christmas
it.
in July.
Yeah.
Delightful.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys will be back in 3 weeks for Fate of the Furious. But for all things Too Fast, Too Forever, go to cageclub.me, facebook.com/Too Fast, Too Forever, or at Too Fast, Too Forever, and all the socials. Email us. We got some emails since last time, which is very exciting. Family@cageclub.me. Check out our Patreon page at toofasttooforever.com. New episode out, Spaceballs,
Yeah.
now. And next week is Sudden Death. If you want to hear us talk about Stanley Cup Finals, Game 7. Oh, what if there's a What if Jean-Claude Van Damme plays goalie for the Panthers tonight?
But nobody knows.
But nobody knows. Email us, family at cageclub.me, Patreon page, toofasttooforever.com, store, cageclub.me/shop. Come back next week for Scrooged. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe, too.
And those are the owners and proprietors of A Dinner Party on a Train, Walt, Hickey, and Bhasin, and we will tell you all about it
when we see you again.